of secrets to give. Imhotep, compared right here on this page to Joseph, the things you learn about the cartouches. This is a Joseph coin. And on the back of that coin, the magic man that made the wealth of all Egypt. Well, there's his grain storage facilities right there. And you're in the year 2020. That's Imhotep, i.e. Joseph, on the front of that coin right there. This step pyramid was built by King Djoser of the 3rd dynasty, and his vizier, Imhotep, it's an important name, Imhotep, was revered through all of the ages of Egyptian history. In the same general area, just a few miles, in fact, or a few kilometers, in fact, from where the Great Pyramid, or the pyramids of Giza, including the Sphinx, would later be built. More than this, that step pyramid complex in Dynasty 3, built by Imhotep, under King Djoser, would actually be the model for the pyramids that would come. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built by Khufu, which is in the 4th dynasty of Egyptian history. Now, speaking of Egyptian history, all of your current timelines of Egyptian history come from this guy here with a star occultic pagan thing on top of his head called Manetho or Manetho. You say tomato, I say tomato. This man's timelines are not only the basis for all current dynasties of Egypt and their timelines for all of your secular universities, but not only that, they've used the timelines from this guy and his Egyptian history as the underpinning of what you are basing your current world history on. This guy's documents. Manetho, he was a priest of Egypt, actually during the time of the Greeks, who believed in this guy here, the Greek god Pan, with the 2 little double horns on top of his head. Egypt had been conquered by Alexander the Great and largely become a joke. You're going to find the Kokapelli, who plays the flute, is always by these kivas, these Indian places, always playing his flute. Well, Pan, the god Pan, plays his flute. And the flute comes, not that playing the flute's bad, it's the Pied Piper story, where the children are going to follow, but they're going to drown in the water, in the Abzu, the abyss. But they followed the Pied Piper, the magical Pied Piper, and they all listened and didn't think. In fact, Alexander had declared himself as Pharaoh, but nonetheless, the priests of Egypt began under Alexander the Great. Well, Alexander the Great was putting together all of the historical and religious texts of the entire world. That included Manetho, who gave us the Egyptian timeline upon which we today have based our entire world history timeline. But let's give him a shot. The uppity-ups and the university professors back there drinking their brandy think that Manetho is the most trustworthy guy on the planet Earth. Let's give him a shot. First of all, the name Manetho means the truth of Thoth. With a name like that, we know it's got to be solid. Okay, so let's take a look here at Manetho, or the Truth of Thoth's document upon which we've based all of current world history from our most Ivy League universities. Well, he states to us, right in the opener, no less. So all of your world history today is based on the writings of the pagan priest Manetho, a priest of Thoth, during the time of the Greeks. Gave you what the secular guys use at all of your universities for Egyptian history is based on the writings of Manetho. His document. That's we're going to have a total of 969 years. Let's see, Kronos, the god Kronos, ruled for 401 years. Now, I actually made a mistake in the video that you're watching. We stated that Kronos ruled for 401 years. It's actually 40 years, so I didn't want to upset any Kronos fans. I want to correct that while I'm standing in the kiva. And just to be clear about this, according to the Greeks, Kronos came from Uranus. He says after this that Osiris and Isis ruled for 35 years. Typhoon, the god Typhoon, for 29 years. So your world history right now, today, that you're going to learn in any university is based on Egyptian history, or what they claim is Egyptian history, based on the writings of the pagan priest, Manetho, priest of Thoth.
Ors, of course, ruled for 20 years, according to his document. And the Oris ruled for, of course, 23 years. This has sounded rock solid to me. Let's look some more.
Now, here's the funny thing, is that in Egypt, you always have Upper Egypt, which is at the bottom, and Lower Egypt, which is at the top. So you have two different sets of pharaohs, even of gods and goddesses, going at any given time in Egyptian history, which means that that history is about half as long as the timeline that you see right here.
He goes on to state that, Anubis, the Egyptian god Anubis, ruled for 17 years. Right after that, Hercules ruled for 15 years. Here he's got Apollo for 25 years, Amon for 30, Tythos for 27, Sosos 32, and of course, right down here at the bottom, he's got big old god Zeus down there for 20 years. Now let me ask you university guys that, because you're a lot smarter than I am. When you're looking at this list, upon which you have based all of Egyptian history and all of world history on top of that, now here's my question, guys. Here's my question. Because you always say that those timelines are just unstretchable, they're rock solid. They're in your hand, rock solid. So let me ask you this. Is there a possibility in your mind, because Hercules seemed to me like a pretty strong dude, are you absolutely certain that he only ruled for 15 years? I mean, he's not tougher than Anubis, who it says here ruled for 17? Or let me give you another practical example, guys. I mean, you're all hardcore atheist secular professors that are out there pitching these timelines as absolutely rock solid, nailed to the wall, airtight. So let me pose this for you. Zeus, that's the thunder god that throws the lightning bolts from the sky. Manetho has got him down here for only 20 years. Are you kidding me? That's all that Zeus gets, according to you fellas? I don't know. I don't know if I can trust this list. Now, of course, here's the truth, but it's not the truth from thought. Well, what they've actually done is, taken what they've liked and left the rest and pushed it aside. The problem is that you can't do that, guys. Because when Manetho is telling you that he believes that Hercules ruled for 15 years, that's equally as real to him as when he's telling you about Ramses II, King Tut, Akhenaten, Thutmose III, Imhotep, the Djoser, Khufu, or Narmer. And more than that, what he's actually copying those documents largely from is the largest pharaoh and most powerful pharaoh and most religious pharaoh that ever lived, breathed, or walked on the face of this earth. The pharaoh that you guys yourselves in Egyptology call the Napoleon of all Egypt. That's who Manetho largely based his timelines and his chronology and the dynasties of Egypt off of. And more than that, it was that same king, Thutmose III, that is largely, he is responsible. Takes the most credit for the Book of the Dead. In fact, all occult today traces its power back to that man upon which that your lists for your current world timelines are entirely based on. But that brings up an interesting point. Let's take a look at what Manetho was actually writing. Sometimes I think you guys don't actually read some of this stuff, or a lot of this stuff, maybe any of the stuff that you actually pitch forth. You're too busy back there sucking down your brandy, sitting in your fancy university chairs. Let me read you what Manetho believed about the history of Egypt. If you guys in the major universities get to pick and choose what you like and what you don't like, what you get to keep and what you don't get to keep, to put together your timelines of all in world history, then I get to do it too. The only difference between, I guess, me and you, I guess, is that I'm actually going to read to you what your guy actually said. Here we go. Oh, look at this. What a surprise. Starting in verse 6, no less. From the creation of Adam, indeed, down to Enoch. Isn't that something? He brings up Enoch in this. To the general cosmic year 1282, the number of days was known in neither month nor year, but the egregori, or the watchers. That would come out of the book of Enoch as well, wouldn't it? Sounds like this guy had a copy. who had held and conversed with men, the watchers, the fallen angels or fallen stars, had conversed with men and taught them that the orbits of the two luminaries, being marked with the 12 signs of the zodiac, are composed of, down here, what does it say? 360 parts. Now, let me think. Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah. In the book of Enoch, in the book of the luminaries. Enoch's calendar has 360 days, with 4 days of remembrance. Those 4 days belong to God. That's why Daniel's prophecy is based on a 360-day year, because the extra 4 days already belong to God. So whether he's going to bless you or curse you, those 4 days belong to him. He's doing it on a 360-day year. But hopping back over to Manetho, oh, you're going to love this. Mesraim, or that would be Mizraim in the Bible from Genesis 10, lived not long after the flood. For after the flood, Shem, he means Ham there, that would be the biblical son of Noah, which he actually specifies in his text, began Egyptus. This is where you get the word Egypt from, or Mizraim, who lived not long after the flood, right here, who was the first to set out to establish himself in Egypt at the time when the tribes began to disperse this way and that. Now, the whole time from Adam to the flood, oh my gosh, this cannot be good for you. These are hardcore atheist university professors that are pitching me as this guy being the inventor of our timelines for Egyptian history, upon which we put our timelines for world history. And he's telling you right here verbatim, from Adam to the flood, according to him, was 2,242 years. Am I missing something here, guys? This is the history that you guys wanted to use for our world. Now, when he says the dispersion this way and that, he means from here at the ziggurat of Eridu, otherwise known in the Bible as the Tower of Babel. Covered here in the Eridu Genesis text, that's what it's called, which covers the event. And goes a step further in the documentation by stating that after the flood, the kingship, this is a God kingship that came down. That's really what Manetho is referring to with Hercules and Zeus and Anubis and all these names in the Egyptian gods. Talking about pre-flood things that came in, just like Enoch was. After the flood, when the kingship from heaven was lowered, the kingship was in Eridu. What are they talking about there? Let me show you. Well, right here on this document, Lord Arata, that stands for Mount Ararat, where the boat that saved all mankind is said to have landed, is having issues with Enmerkar, or the biblical Nimrod in the text. And what he writes is this. This is Enmerkar, who's having trouble getting Lord Arata, who lives up in the mountains, to give offerings to his pagan gods in support of his newly building tower project. And he states this: Enki, the wise and knowing Lord of the earth, this is one of your oldest documents on the planet, shall bring back the speech. The tongues were confused at the Tower of Babel. The word Babel actually means Babel. Shall bring back the speech in their mouths, so that the speech of mankind is truly again one. And who is the Enki? Well, of course, he's this little dude here. And these wavy lines represent a dimensional portal in which he's stepping up into all reality out of, because he's been summoned right at Eridu, where the Tower of Babel was, just like it's clearly and distinctly specified in pretty well all, not just the Bible, pretty well all of your original documents of this planet Earth. So as Manetho continues by telling us, beginning in 12, notice the things that the devil doth. Thoth is not Yod-He Vav-He. 12. 12 is a number of authority to God. This is the number he uses. The zodiac has an equal number of parts, 360. You got that from Enoch. But he got it filtered through who? And the reigns of the gods who ruled among them for 6 generations in 6 dynasties. He's talking about prior to the flood. Covered, of course, is the Egyptian Nu, or abyss, the boat that saved all mankind, and the long lifespans covered not just in the biblical text, but right here in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, whose father was the Unseen One, ruled for 126 years. Empires right falling down over here, beginning with the Tower of Babel. On this side over here, where you see massive ziggurats beginning to form, and the inception of Babylon. By the way, Gilgamesh claimed that he was part man, part God, and part something else. And of course, the Sumerian kings list places the flood at anywhere between 3000 and 3500 BC. Same kings list that also covers the flood from the Sumerian or Babylonian Assyrian side, putting these kings prior to the flood with enormous lifespans. Now let me ask you something about this particular document. Not dissimilar to the occult of the Egyptian stuff. Does this particular king's list, does it look like it's got a lot of, I mean, that's 3 sets of 6s right there, isn't it? Heading back over to our empires that are the size of modern day super Walmarts. What Manetho is actually copying here comes from the perspective of Nimrod right over here through Cush and up through Ham, who was the son that Noah put the curse on, and that's according to his own words right here when he says Misraim lived not long after the flood, for after the flood Shem, or he means Ham, that's who Nimrod came through, or in Merkar, the son of Noah, begat Egyptus or Misraim, who was the first to set out to establish himself in Egypt. And Manetho is writing you in his document exactly what he's starting with right here, a history of Egypt that comes through Ham, the cursed son, through Nimrod, who built the tower and summons the Enki, and also goes by the name of Nimrod, being depicted right here with the same star being depicted right on the forehead with the third eye, or the Urias, the serpent goes on Manetho's head, whose wife was the infamous goddess with the moon on her head, Semiramis, and Semiramis or Semiramis. Her name in the ancient world is going to be Inanna. In the Sumerian epics, she'll be Inanna in ancient Sumeria. Who Inanna really is, the moon goddess with the moon over her head. Who she really is, it's Utu, it's Ham, the rebellious son of Noah. It's Ham's spoiled granddaughter, his spoiled, whiny, bratty granddaughter. That's why Inanna's name is on all the ancient temples. And Nimrod, her husband, who's also her brother, she is also the wife of Nimrod. And she's very evil too. There's Lilith and her combinations with Inanna and Ishtar and ancient Lilith, Genesis and Enoch 6, and of course Enoch 69, and that deals with abortion and Planned Parenthood, the modern altars for sacrifice in your modern age, which is almost appropriate to be talking about that in a kiva standing right here. And here are your Machu Picchu temples, where they would cut the heart out and sacrifice you to their god, the dragon waiting on the other side, the Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the flying serpent, the god of the air, where you find all of these strange skulls, whose child was the part god, part man union called Tammuz, the goat. All of your ancient cultures were looking up at the stars, particularly in Sumerian. That's true, isn't it? He says that's true. Utu in Sumerian is Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons. Utu, or the Shemesh, and this would come from the Sumerian documents. This is actually, Utu is Ham, the 3rd son of Noah, often represented. He was the beginning representation of the sun god in the ancient world. You have Cush, and then you get down a little ways down, you get down to Nimrod. Nimrod in the Sumerian text is in Merkar. The Kar, and in Merkar, means mighty hunter. Just like in Genesis, God calls Nimrod the mighty hunter against the Lord. Yakapelu.
All of it's in these books. The War of Noah. I bet you even never thought of such a thing. You know that's covered from Nimrod's side. The War of Noah. Nimrod literally covers in those texts that while he's going to war on his great-grandfather Noah, that Noah is up in the mountains, has fortified with thorns, and is releasing ancient dragons on Nimrod and his men. And the dragons are eating Nimrod's men, and Nimrod covers that he's upset about this. We'll be going through that heavily in Nimrod, both the book and the movie. Did you eat some of Nimrod's men?
And then all of these people, including Nimrod, Gilgamesh's father, the exact explanation of who all these people are is covered in these Sumerian documents, which are the oldest documents on your planet. And that's why in these books, I have literally matched up from the Sumerian Kings list over here on this side of the page. I have matched up for you. Let me go over here to this side. I have matched up for you in the Sumerian text what name goes with what biblical name. This is the first time this has been done in history that I'm aware of. I have matched up the Sumerian names with the biblical names, and they're going to fit together like a glove because they're telling the same stories from opposing views. Man, the ancient world, there should be no confusion about the ancient history of our world following the release of these materials. These sections here deal with Gilgamesh and his journey to go see Noah. There's never been any confusion, even with the hardcore atheist secular communities, that's what the Epic of Gilgamesh is discussing, or portions thereof. We're taking that a lot further. I'm breaking down for you. Gilgamesh is telling you exactly where he went to. He's telling you details about Noah. Prior to him, Gilgamesh is a friend of Nimrod's son, Pan, or who would earlier have been called Tammuz, seen here deified on a throne. Inanna, or who is often called Semiramis, she is, oh man, this is an arrogant little gal, of all of the granddaughters of Ham. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these basically at this point. Nimrod, who she's married to, this was also the this was the spoiled grandbaby. Spoiled way out there, grandbaby. And when I say grandbaby, I'm talking his other brothers could have been 200 years old by the time that Nimrod was born. So to put this in perspective, and this is an effect that even happens today, where the young baby gets glorified over its brothers and sisters because it's the young baby one, born at the same time that they might even have their own grandchildren. That's who Nimrod was. You're going to go on a journey from darkness, stepping out into the light. Keep it yours, guys. We really don't know how old Nimrod was because neither the Sumerian texts are going to give us convoluted answers, and the book of Genesis follows the descent line that's leading to Jesus Christ. So though it talks about Nimrod, it doesn't focus on his age. What you look at on pages like this with the Genesis timelines, first of all, Noah was 600 years old when the flood came. He lived roughly 350 years afterwards. He died not long after the fights with Nimrod. To put this in just a little better perspective, this right here is a map of the United States from the from the 1800s. Just a little before that, you're talking about sparse sprinkles of pilgrims and Indians. Fast forward just a couple hundred years. You're at bustling, towering cities from sea to shining sea and everywhere between. Lit up from space, each city with millions and millions of residents in just a couple of hundred years. And that's not even with families having 10 and 20 kids apiece, as is what you're reading in those ancient records. Nimrod could have been 200, he could have been 150, he could have been, many of these other kids had their children at the ages of 125, 135 was a common age. And if Nimrod is the beloved grandbaby, he may well be further out than that. What we know for a fact is that when you're dealing with population growth, that happens far more rapidly than people imagine. Starting with those 3 people coming off the ship, by the time of Nimrod, you could have had hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and did. Mathematically, you would have, that were living at that time. Those were the people building your cities. So the Epic of Gilgamesh, and this is a museum quality replica that I'm holding in my hand here, that we were lucky enough to get. By the time of the Epic of Gilgamesh, there would have been, there could have been, by the time of Abraham, which is in that same time frame, your mathematics puts you at roughly 10 million people by that time on the planet Earth. And then who was married to, oh my gosh, this is the ultra spoiled brat of the Ham family. I'm going to talk about why Ham got the curse. And by the way, getting that we're all living under a curse in this place. That comes from the lineage of Adam. So you're not doesn't matter what race, creed, color, anything that you are, you're living under a curse. All of us need deliverance from the curse. But in the case of Ham, the reason Noah got so mad at Ham is because Ham was a thief, a lying, cheating thief. And that's why he told lies to his own family, which they couldn't run from. Nimrod knew the stigma on his own family. And that's why he was trying, in these texts right here, the most arrogant on earth. And Manetho is bragging about how they ripped off the garments, how Ham stole the garments of Adam and Eve that were given by God in the garden. In these texts right here, some of the oldest on the planet, she's bragging about that. She wore those garments at her wedding, according to these texts. They can't hide their shame of who they are. Or, hopping over to Egypt, the same trinity is called Osiris, that's Nimrod, Isis, that's Semramses, and Horus. Same 3 figures. So this set of 3 and 3 over here in Babylon and 3 over here in Egypt, they're not quite the same people, but they are the same religious system. Some interesting differences between the 2, which we'll unpack in some later videos. But it is sufficient to state this: it is a complete set. That would make another 6, wouldn't it? It's all ancestor worship, coming right down through the line of Ham, through Kish, through Nimrod, or in Merkur right over here, and the gods of Egypt, the plethora, that are in fact written out right here by Manetho himself, are all fallen angels, devils, and demons, beginning with Sanyaza and Azazel, according to the book of Enoch, because Nimrod, or in Merkur, coming through the lineage of Ham, has shifted everything. He was controlling the knowledge of mankind. Bottom line, he was worshiping devils. And that's the history that you're reading. And these fallen angels and devils are in fact one and the same as the gods of Egypt. And Alexander the Great had declared himself as Pharaoh of Egypt. And he began funding to gain all of the knowledge of the world. And that would include the writing of the Septuagint for the Hebrews, which means 70, the most concise history on earth. But he also funded the Egyptians through Manetho to give you a history of the world. So your secular guys have gone with the pagan, the priest of Thoth, which is funny. It's interesting in and of itself. Thoth is the god of wisdom to the Egyptians, to write your history of the world. And that history matches tit for tat with the biblical history. Oh, the only difference is this. In the Egyptians' view, all of the fallen angels, the demons, the devils, all of this stuff, all of your witchery is really good guys. In your Hebrew history, demons and things like this are bad guys.